2. Living in the small town of Crescent Lake had its advantages. Sherry would be able to walk and pick up her car from the garage in the morning. True to his word, Sam drove her back to town and dropped her at home after giving her ointment and a bandage for her blister. She offered to pay him for gas, but he refused and took off without a backward glance. Had she offended him? It was hard to say, as his mouth stayed flat and his eyes were hidden behind his sunglasses. She sat on the swing on the front porch, gliding. Her mom came out and joined her. "Did I hear a truck?" She looked at the driveway. "Where's your car?" "I got a flat, and Sam Price drove me home. I didn't have a spare." "Sherry, what happened to it?" She shrugged. "I didn't think I had to check and make sure it was there before I bought the car." With a gentle admonishment, her mom said, "This is why you should have asked your father to go with you. Heaven only knows what else is wrong with it." "Mom." Tired of this same conversation for the last 3 days since she bought it, she said, "Please, just let it go." She looked across the lawn, wondering what the front garden would look like with some pink hydrangeas. "Ever since you were a baby, you've always been stubborn." Her mom launched into one of the old stories about her independence and learning everything the hard way. She waited until Mom was finished with her story before she spoke. "I didn't realize Mrs. Price died of cancer." Mom crossed her arms over her midsection. "Elizabeth was a kind-hearted woman. She always had a smile on her face. She lived less than 6 months after the diagnosis." Sherry clasped her mom's hand. It caused her heart to ache as she thought about how she would feel if she lost her own mother. It must be hard for Sam to be surrounded by so many memories of her. "I think Sam is having a hard time with her death." "Understandable. She was young." "Did you know she was a big gardener?" "I did." She looked out over the yard. "Every year she would enter vegetables and different jams in the county fair. Of course, the hands-down favorite each year was her grape jam. With all those vines, it was easy to have the best fruit." Mom brushed Sherry's ponytail off her shoulder. "You have a few days before you go back to college. What do you have planned?" She couldn't shake the empathy she felt for Sam. "I'm not sure." An idea was rolling around in her head, but she didn't want to say anything. At least not yet. She patted Sherry's hand and got up. "You should enjoy them. Once you graduate, you'll be working every day, and it'll be a year before you earn vacation time." Sherry could feel her shoulders sag. "Thanks for the reminder." Her mom laughed. "You can still become a teacher. We work hard, but our summers are more relaxed since we use that time for planning. It's a nice perk when compared to the rest of the workforce." With a firm shake of her head, she said, "That's definitely not for me. But thanks for the suggestion." Mom opened the screen door. "Dinner's at 6. She left Sherry alone on the porch. She rested the back of her head against the house and closed her eyes. She didn't need to be reminded of the dull days that loomed after graduation. What had she been thinking? Because she was good with numbers didn't mean she had to be tethered to a calculator for the rest of her life. The house phone rang and she could hear her mom talking, but not to who. "Sherry, that was Henry Waters at the garage. He said your car will be ready in about an hour." "Thanks." She'd walk over and pick it up today. She had a plan. But first, she'd swing by the pharmacy for sunscreen and a new straw hat, and then she needed to raid her father's shed. If she had to prepare herself for a life of drudgery in a couple of months, she would spend the remainder of the week doing what she loved most: gardening. Sherry sat on the rock wall and took the hat from her head to wipe her face and neck with a bright pink handkerchief. Digging out deep, entrenched weeds was hard but satisfying work. In some cases, she wasn't sure what was a weed or a plant. Too bad she had never seen the gardens in full bloom. It would have made this project easier. She could hear trucks rumble in the distance. There seemed to be a lot of activity beyond her line of sight, but sounds carried through the valley. Her thoughts drifted to Sam, and she wondered what he was doing today. The breeze rustled the tree limbs above her. She leaned back to enjoy the sun as it warmed her face. Being outside was a rare treat. She could hear the dogs barking and wondered if they were in the house. After drinking some water, she got lost in working the soil. She had deliberately chosen the garden closest to the road since it was the first thing a visitor would see when coming to the winery. First impressions were everything. Crescent Lake Winery was becoming known for their tasting room and wines. They had been a part of the wine trail since its inception a few years previously. She put a cassette tape in her portable recorder and listened to music. After a while, she glanced up and was pleased to see Sam headed in her direction. "Sherry?" His eyes were masked by his sunglasses. She got up from the ground and wiped her soil-covered hands on her jeans. She gave him a sheepish smile. "Hey, Sam." He looked at the flower bed. "This is my mother's. What are you doing here?" His face was a mask as he waited for an answer. What she'd want me to do. Since I loved a garden, and you were nice to help me out yesterday, I thought I'd come over and see if I could get the flower bed in shape. She looked around, wishing the ground would swallow her up, embarrassed to be caught on their property without permission. His brown eyes softened. "That's not necessary. Friends help each other out." She cocked her head. "We're friends now?" she teased. His smile dimmed. "I thought we were." They had been school acquaintances, never close friends. They hadn't run in the same circle. He had always been in the science lab, geeking out on stuff, and she was into every activity possible, even a football cheerleader for 2 seasons, and National Honor Society. She stopped trying to be funny. "So what do you think?" She gestured to the flower bed. "I don't have anything to go by, so I'm not 100% sure what's a plant or a weed, since there are some varieties I've never seen before. Either way, it'll look better when I'm done." He was still quiet, so she kept up a running commentary. "Later today, I'm going to pick up some annuals for an added splash of quick color." She flashed him a big grin. "Curb appeal, for when you have customers coming to the tasting room." "It looks real nice. Thanks for doing this." He glanced around. "It's kind of quiet down here. Do you want the dogs for company?" "I've got my tapes." She picked up a small hand trowel. "Well, I'll be finished in a while, and then I'll take off." He turned and walked back up the hill. Over his shoulder, he said, "Thanks again." Sam didn't seem his brash self today. She threw more dandelion roots on her growing pile of weeds. Dismayed, she wondered how she would get that stack cleaned up. The bucket she had brought from home had been filled hours ago. Only another 10 feet and she was done. A short time later, she heard the dogs again, only this time they were growing closer. Had they somehow gotten out of their pen? Would they remember her from yesterday? Her heart skipped. What if they attacked? They rushed over the knoll and headed for her at top speed. Frozen in her sneakers, she waited for them to leap with teeth bared. A sharp whistle, and they skidded to a stop right in front of her. They were panting, and if she hadn't known better, she'd have thought they were smiling. Riding a bright green scooter, Sam coasted down the driveway and pulled up onto the grass. What was he doing back? He strode over to her with a thermos and a small bag in one hand and a blue tarp in the other. A slow, sexy smile spread across his face. "I talked to my dad, and he said if you're interested in working while you're in town, he'll pay you to clean up the rest of the beds." He handed her a thermos. "Iced tea, and one of the ladies from the tasting room made some oatmeal cookies. I thought you might like a couple." He looked at the dogs. They watched the bag, their heads cocked to one side. "And don't feed the pups, no matter how sad they look. They've had their treats already." She glanced at the dogs. "You're leaving them here?" "Yeah, we've had a couple of bears wandering around, and with the boys here, nothing will venture close." She looked around. A finger of fear raced down her back. She had never thought about the potential wildlife out here. "Hey," his voice was gentle. "It's just a precaution." "Okay, if you're sure." She looked back over her shoulder and wondered if a bear had been watching her this whole time. He chuckled as if reading her mind. "They won't hurt you unless they're protecting their young. And mama bears are waking up with babies." He jerked his thumb in the pup's direction. They'll be on their best behavior." As if on cue, the dogs got up and walked over to Sherry and sat at her feet. She rubbed the tops of their heads and relaxed. She'd save the cookies for later to use as a potential bribe if needed. "I appreciate the snack, and I'll think about your dad's offer." She shielded her eyes and pointed to the tarp. "And what's that for?" He flicked it open. "Put all the weeds on here and I'll pick it up later and dump it." Well, that issue was solved. "Thanks, that's a help." He gave her that smile again, the one that made her heart beat a bit quicker. "Can you bring the dogs up to the house before you go? The back gate is open. Just put them in there." She nodded. "Sure." He got on the scooter and took off without a backward glance. "Doc, Mo, do you weed?" The dogs looked at her like she was speaking gibberish, and then pushed her hands on top of their heads so she'd pet them. With a laugh, she scratched behind their ears and said, "I need to finish, so go lie down." To her surprise, they each did as she asked, but they kept their eyes open and would look around as if taking their security job seriously. Before long, she was finished, and the weeds were piled on the blue tarp. It had been a good day's work. Her muscles were sore, but in a satisfying way. While digging, she couldn't stop thinking about the opportunity to spend the next few days bringing more of these beds back to life. She sat on her backside and looked around. She wanted to take Mr. Price up on his job offer. It was better than hanging around contemplating life after graduation. She stashed her tools in the trunk, which now had a spare tire and a jack. With a smile, she opened the driver's door and pointed to the back seat. "Boys, hop in. We'll drive up to the house." They scrambled into the car, but perched in the passenger seat. "Having you two around was kind of nice. Maybe you can hang out with me tomorrow." She drove toward the large colonial. This time, she took a good look at the wide wraparound porch. The front of the house cried out for the window boxes to be filled with colorful flowers and trailing ivy, and the porch could use pots of flowers on the stone steps leading up to the door. She bet when Mrs. Price was alive, it had all of that and more.